千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Daodejing 35 key concepts. Our purpose highlights the most significant concepts in this chapter. When I say most significant, I'm talking about the number one, the concepts that stand out. Number two, the concepts that echo in other parts of the Daodejing and also in other works of the Tao, such as I Ching, Zhuangzi, etc. Those are the most significant concepts. When you grasp onto those significant concepts, you pretty much have mastered this entire chapter. So let's dive right in and talk about that. Here's the chapter, and the first key concept is the concept that we were just talking about, holding the great image. So what I'll do is that I'll make that red, and specifically I am going to single out two characters here. The second character, Da, means big, vast, grand, great, huge, and then Xiang is what we translate as image. So this is a key concept with a number of reasons why. Those of you who have been following this talk, you probably recall that we had a discussion on the abstract cosmology of the Tao. It was using the expressions, the descriptions that are infused into the I Ching from more than 4,000 years ago, and the oral tradition goes back much further than that, perhaps 10,000 years or more. That abstract cosmology walked everyone through a sequence of this abstract creation of the Tao. Everyone was fascinated. It was frankly a fascinating topic. And when we got to one particular point, when we talked about Xiang, people were asking to know more, to hear more about it. And I said, well, we will touch upon it again in the Daodejing, and here we are in 35. So this is when we delve a little bit into that as one of the key concepts. You'll see quite a bit of material from the I Ching. Many people have been asking about I Ching as well. So this is a good opportunity. So I'm going to isolate the character Xiang. As you know, in this chapter, I translated Xiang as image, although the term has no real English equivalent, only approximations. And let me explain. I'm always wary when an author or expert presents a vague description like that. So unless they can back it up, I'm very much inclined to think that they are being vague only because they are unclear as to the exact meaning. Well, I'm going to be very clear. In this context, the image of the Tao is like a representation or reflection, something that follows the pattern of the Tao. When you look into a mirror, you see an image of you. It's a reflection of you. It is something that follows the optical patterns, the patterns made by light bouncing off of you visually onto the mirror and back into your eyes. So it's like that. This term, Xiang, is specific to the Tao. It's Tao terminology that goes back a long way. And we're talking more than 4,000 years ago from the Jing. Now, I know many people who are listening and people who will be checking out the YouTube presentation will say Ching. It's actually Jing. And no matter how it's spelled, the new spelling, the new standard is yi instead of I, and then jing instead of ching. But no matter how it's spelled, it's always Jing. So in the Jing, it says this specific thing. Let me show you, and then I will explain. So 太极生两仪，两仪生四象。At the very last character here, you see the exact same character that we're talking about as image, reflection, representation, etc. So what is all this? Well, let's break it down. 太极, the first two characters, take a look at the bottom here. I've got 太极, the supreme ultimate. That's a literal translation of the two characters, the supreme ultimate. You know Tai Chi better as Tai Chi in the West. You know, when people move through a series of motions and poses slowly, sort of like yoga, except everything is always moving. Tai Chi, you see people doing this in the park. You see people do it on television sometimes. It's a great way to exercise, and many elderly people are really into it because it promotes health, mobility, and longevity. Longevity is what I'm trying to say. So 太极拳, the Tai Chi that we talk about is derived from this term right here. Shen, the character in the middle, means to give rise to, give birth to, etc. Then we get to the two complements. So 太极 is the one. It gives rise to the two. The two complements, we usually know them as yin and yang. That is the most common way to refer to the two complements. It's the two complementary dualities. And the two complements give rise to the four xiang. And here, I'll just use the word manifestations because it's a word that can include reflections, representations, images. As I said, there is no exact English equivalence. There are approximations. And you are now seeing the most accurate description of xiang available. Now let me explain. Let me explain what this means. The four manifestations, 四象. What are the four manifestations? Why four? So we are now deep in the beginning of I Ching. In the very beginning of the I Ching, it steps everyone through the process of the abstract cosmology of the Tao. So I'm repeating what I had in the previous slide here, but at the top. So here's the question. What are the four manifestations? Well, here's the answer. They are abstract concepts that can represent natural phenomena, such as the four seasons. So four manifestations can mean the four seasons. It can also mean, for instance, the four cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west. It can also be the four directions in terms of your movement on land, where you can go forward or back or to the left or to the right. So that's not the same as north, south, east, and west, because depending on which way you're facing, forward and back, east, to the left and to the right, can correspond to any one of the four cardinal directions. So the four things the four aspects. In general, whenever you have a 2x2 matrix, 四象 will naturally be present. So here's an example. Let's take a look. In this table that you see here, this deserves more of an explanation, and I think this is the sort of thing that you will not find in any other book on the Daodejing. Let's look at the columns. You've got yin and yang. So I've got the Chinese characters right next to them. So yin and yang are the complementary dualities. Then they are further categorized as Lao or Tai versus Shao. Shao means young, Lao means old, Tai means the supreme. So when you combine them, you get Lao Yin, Tai Yin, Lao Yang, Tai Yang. These are the same. These are synonymous. They're just different names for the same thing in each category. And then you get Shao Yin, Shao Yang. So what is that? What does that mean? So this is where the explanation comes in for the four manifestations like this. First of all, let me explain the difference between young and old or supreme. So the idea is that when you are looking at each half of the yin and yang duality, whether it's yin or yang, you see that it can be further divided. You can categorize, for instance, with yin, and think of these as energies. I think everybody's comfortable thinking about yin and yang as complementary energies, positive, negative, active, passive, male, female, stuff like that. So when you are looking at one aspect of the energy, you have further divisions, categorizations. You have instances where the energy is just being developed, starting to be developed. That's the young. Then you have the energy at its maximum, at its ultimate, which is the old. So that's why you have these divisions. Shao Yin, that energy when it's still in the beginning phase, and Lao Yin or Tai Yin when that energy has been fully manifested. Same on the yang side. Now, by coincidence, Tai Yang means the sun. But the whole idea, don't lose sight of the basic idea, is that with yang energy, you can have a beginning phase when it's starting to manifest. Then you can have the ultimate aspect of it when it has been fully manifested. That is 四象 right there. So just a little bit more to drive home the concept. First of all, recognize that everything's relative. So whenever you divide the one into two, each half of the yin and yang duality can be further distinguished into subdualities. So with yin, you could, for instance, have big and small yin, large yin, small yin. With yang, same thing, large yang, small yang. So another example, you can divide any category pretty much as above average or below average. So above average would be 51 to 100%, below average would be 1 to 50%. So two halves, the big and the small. Then you can further divide, for instance, the above average category, the upper 50, you can divide that into 25% divisions. So the upper category will be 76 to 100%, and then there's also going to be a 51 to 75%. This kind of division and subdivision can go on indefinitely. The process is recursive. Recursive means that it repeats, it reapplies to itself repeatedly. And usually people will say it's iterative and recursive, and that's what it means. That you can divide something into halves and then divide that into quarters, divide it into 1/8, 1/16, 1/32, and so forth, resulting in a universe that can be subdivided infinitely, indefinitely, in fractal geometry. So when you get into things like the fractal nature of reality, well, that's actually one of the implications of this concept, of the four manifestations. So one more slide, then we will be ready to take a break. One more slide to really drive home the first key concept. And that slide is basically to depict the progression that is described in the I Ching, and then we can move on to the second key concept after the break. So in I Ching, we start out with 0, 无极, that's the void, that's the nothingness. It's usually represented by, for instance, a blank piece of paper, the void. It's the void where everything comes from. It's the void that's full of possibilities waiting for manifestation. So from the 0, from the 无极, comes the 1, the Taiji. The Taiji is the supreme ultimate. And you have the Chinese characters there. So this is the unity, the oneness of the Tao. Usually, this is represented by a circle. Then we go from 1 to the 2, and from here on, it's going to be multiplication by 2 successively. 2, you know the 2 as yin and yang. So in Chinese, you'll see 两仪, the 2 manifestations, the 2 complements, and then you'll see yin yang, which is the Mandarin characters for yin and yang. Then the subject, what we're just talking about, is what you get when you multiply this by 2, you get to 4, as in the 4 manifestations, 四象. And what happens when you multiply by 2 again? You get to 八卦, the 8 trigrams. And here you have the Mandarin characters for that. It's very literal. That's the character for 8. That's the character for trigrams. It's the same with the other characters. They're very literal. 四象, 4 manifestations. So what happens when you multiply 8 by 2 again? You get to 16, and there's no specific term in I Ching for that. Same with 32, no specific term. You do, however, get a specific term when you multiply by 2 again to the 64 hexagrams. 64卦. And in the Daodejing, the point is made that you go from 8 to 64 because 8 times 8, 8 times itself, is 64. So there you have it. Here we have the progression of the abstract cosmology from the I Ching. Let us explore concept number 2 together. Key concept number 2, you'll see in line 4. And I have highlighted 2 characters there. And the translation, passing travelers. So this deserves some additional coverage and discussion. Passing travelers is a way to talk about how temporary, how transient, how impermanent everything is. So here's the slide on that. What I'll do is that I isolate the 2 characters, 过客, the passing guest. So When we speak of transience and impermanence, these are concepts that are usually associated with Buddhist thinking. But these two characters tell us that long before Buddhist philosophy came to ancient China, Tao sages had already developed the concept to talk about that, to talk about transience and impermanence. What is that concept? The concept is that we are not permanent owners of anything. Every one of us is just passing through. We're here today, gone tomorrow. Let me also be careful to note here that the great majority of Tao cultivators believe that when we look at life as a great journey, most Tao cultivators see that this journey is one of many. That is, it's one leg of the journey. That you, as an immortal spirit, you've been on many legs of the journey before, many previous lifetimes, each of which was a journey in the overall journey of the soul. Now, you don't need to accept that, of course. You can also think just in terms of the life that you know about, the one in the here and now. So either you see this lifetime as just the one and only journey, or you see it as one journey out of many, with many more journeys to come. The idea that I'll present here will apply either way. So the basic idea is that even when we think of ourselves as residents in a particular place, like the home where you live right now, even if you think of yourself as the owner, the residence, you live here, you're here permanently, well, in the Tao perspective, it's not permanent. We are more like visitors. From the perspective of the lifetime, you are here now, temporarily on a visit, and you're going to be gone perhaps in decades. So because of that, we're not really owners of anything. Even our physical bodies that we think we own, we're really just borrowing temporarily. Bodies are temporary vessels to facilitate this overall need that we have to explore the material world, to experience things as a physical entity. So 过客, the passing guest, is just about this idea that we're not here permanently, we're here as a guest, passing through. And as we're passing through this material world, we're definitely seeing a lot of distractions, a lot of temptations. So noticing these temptations, the sights and sounds, we know that we can be led off the path pretty easily because the distractions are pretty tempting. And that is why we need to focus on the opposite, the Tao itself, which is not transient, which is not impermanent, it's constant, it's eternal. But it goes to the next key concept number 3, which is that the Tao, unlike the sights and sounds, the distractions, the temptations, the Tao itself is plain, it's unexciting. That comes from key concept number 3 from line 6, which is about the Tao being bland and without flavor. So to address that key concept specifically, I want to compare and contrast the Tao and temptations of the material world, with the temptations to the left and the Tao to the right. So what can we say about temptations and how is it different? How are they different from the Tao? Well, one thing we can say is that temptations seem exciting, they seem interesting, but they're not necessities. I may be very excited by the latest gadgets, but I know that I can live without them. What about the Tao? The Tao is bland and tasteless, yet essential. Now, of course, I recognize that not everybody understands that the Tao is essential. It is certainly essential to me, but from the Tao perspective, it is also essential to everyone, even when they don't know what the Tao is. And we have more material in this slide to address that. But back to temptations for just a moment. Second question, well, what do we do with temptations? We know how they are. They seem exciting and interesting, but they're not necessities. What do we do with them? Well, second bullet point there is that the temptations are usually pursued, lusted after, and obsessed over. We go after them with a vengeance. What about the Tao? Well, not so much. The Tao is not usually pursued, lusted after, or obsessed over. So think of the Tao as being like water or air. With water and air, usually we take them for granted. We don't obsess over water or air. We don't lust after it. We don't pursue it. It's just there. It's just presence. With temptations, we know the pursuit and lust of temptations has negative consequences. Obsessions over temptations will have negative consequences to life. And we can become addicted to the pursuits, to the lust, to the obsession, and the damage that's possible from the addiction is real. So you can actually quit the temptations and be free of them as if they are an addiction. And some would definitely go further and say, well, that's exactly what they are. They are an addiction. We're addicted to fame and fortune, to things that we can acquire, things that don't really last, but we're addicted to them. So what about the Tao? With the temptations, you can actually quit them. You can stop chasing after them. What about the Tao? Well, like water and air, when you are deprived of them, you quickly realize you cannot be without them. Although you took them for granted, when you don't have them, you quickly realize how much you actually need them. And there's another characteristic about temptations that's worth going over, is that, well, the appeal, the exciting, interesting attraction, it wears off. You can get sick of them after a while. Being stuffed with food, feeling very uncomfortable, hearing a song too many times. This last holiday season that we had, I actually heard quite a few complaints about particular Christmas songs that were being played and repeated ad infinitum. So people were about to go out of their minds from hearing those songs too many times. Seeing beauty fade with age doesn't last. And hearing lies repeated, you get sick of that very quickly, and so on. What about the Tao? Do you get sick of them? Well, think of water and air. There's no getting sick of water and air. Why not? Well, because they're bland and tasteless. There's nothing to get sick over. There's no taste to water, so you can't get sick of the taste. There's nothing. So that is the key concept about the Tao being plain, simple, flavorless, tasteless, bland, unexciting. So now there's key concept number 4. Use it, it cannot be exhausted. So what is that? What does that mean? How do we expand on it? Well, this is related to the story that the personal observation that I shared about this particular Tao master, that when he experiences the infinite nature of the Tao, it expands his perceptions. So here, we seem to be back to that same point again, tying it up together. Notice that the first key concept was hold the great image, which was what the blue slide was all about. The 8 points about what it means to hold the great image. Now, we are wrapping everything up on the Tao as an infinite resource. So for this one, I would like to go over a mental imagery with you to make sure that this sticks. So I isolated the characters here, which means use it, it cannot be exhausted. So now, here's what I would like to ask everyone to do. Imagine a well in the center of a village. This well has been there for untold generations. So for as long as anyone remembers, that well has been around. It was constructed a long time ago and it's been serving the village ever since. And let me use a picture here to depict that. So the relationship between the villagers and the well is one of need. The villagers depend on the well, and the well has never failed them. Year after year, the well has always provided them with fresh water. So the village, the life of the village is sustained by the water from the well. And no matter how much the villagers draw water from the well, the water level always seems to be the same. It doesn't get higher, it doesn't get lower, the well never runs dry. So I think by now, you know what I'm trying to get at when I'm using this well to talk about the Tao. That the Tao, use it, it's never exhausted. It's like the villagers drawing water from the well, but no matter how much they do that, there is always more. The well never runs dry. There's always water in the well. So utilize this to apply to you. The well is the Tao as an infinite resource. The village is your world. The villagers are you. Okay, now this is key concept number 4. We have a total of 4 key concepts that span this particular chapter. Now, the very last thing that we should do is to challenge ourselves to combine the 4 concepts together. Bring the 4 concepts together. And does anyone remember what the 4 concepts were? If not, it's okay, I can repeat. The first of the 4 concepts was the great image. The second key concept was the passing guest. The third concept, key concept, was the plain Tao, the Tao that is bland and without flavor. And the fourth key concept is the infinite Tao. So looking at the last 2, you see that the Tao, although seemingly plain, is actually unlimited. infinite. So these are the four concepts. How would we string them together? How would we stitch them together as an overall thing, as an overall concept? So what I want to do is to challenge you to do that. So there's a few things to keep in mind. Here's the expression of the challenge. Here's the task. See if you can combine the four concepts into one. Make it a narrative. Make it a narrative that links all four together as a coherent thing. Now, to do that, you can change the order of the key concepts in any way that makes sense to you. You can combine some of the key concepts together into one thing. You can switch them around, whatever makes sense, whatever works for you. So literally, this exercise, there's no right or wrong way to do this. There's no better or worse. The doing of the exercise is the point. So once you've had a chance to do this, I want to invite everyone to do this yourself. At the very end of our time together today, we'll look at one way to do it, and we'll make that our summary for this entire chapter. Summary. As I mentioned, I will provide an example of one way to string the four key concepts together into one narrative. And the invitation for everyone is to try that yourself, to do it on your own. There's no right way or wrong way, as I mentioned, no better or worse. Now, just as a reminder, what were the four key concepts? Does anyone remember? Here's what they were. Key concept number one, 大象, the great image. Key concept number two, 过客, the passing guest. Then we have key concept number three, the plain Tao, the Tao that is without flavor, that is bland. And lastly, the infinite Tao, the Tao that cannot be exhausted, is unlimited, goes on forever. Okay, so to conclude and summarize this chapter, let me present one way to unify the four, to combine the four together. So first, think of our lives as a great journey. At the moment, you and I have the good fortune of traveling together. So this is to say, we're travel companions. And as we go about our lives outside of the Tao meeting, this weekly Tao meeting, we encounter other people, and they too become our travel companions in the journey of life. So you can look at this in a variety of different ways. It's a great honor and privilege for me to be able to share part of the journey with you. Of course, I don't know how long we're going to be able to travel together. I just cherish what we have right now. I'm very grateful for what we can do together, talk about together. So this is the beginning of the narrative, our lives as a great journey, and we're all in it. You and me, we're in it together. Then we are all passing through the material world on this great journey. And as we do so, as we're passing through it, we are definitely noticing all the sights and sounds. Isn't that true? Think about the lives that we have. Think about everything that we encounter throughout the day. There's all these There's all the advertising that we come across. Definitely the sights and sounds. There's all the entertainment, all the options, all the distractions. So I think you can see why I chose the caravan at the bottom to be symbolic of the journey. So as the caravan is making its way through the desert, it can see off in the distance an oasis, or possibly just a mirage. So that's the second one. Then, as we notice the sights and sounds, we're also remembering the words of a wise teacher, Lao Tzu. And because of that recollection, we bring the great image of the Tao to mind. And another way to say it, of course, is the image of the Great Tao, either way. And this helps us deal with the temptations and the distractions. So the image of the Great Tao, it is infinite, but it seems plain and ordinary. It provides us with everything we actually need. The temptations, the sights and sounds actually do not, but the Tao does. And the Tao is unlimited, so it turns out to be our one great infinite resource. So I hope that this gives you a Tao perspective on life itself. That's the great gift of Daodejing chapter 35, is to give us that perspective, and at the same time also telling us to hold the great image of the Tao in mind, that it's a practice that has many powerful benefits. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us travel safely. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.